Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Almassian. Although I'm only 36 years old, I'm old enough to remember when politics, and especially international politics, was considered a serious business, which serious people and clear-headed people were in charge of it. Because guess what? The role of the politicians and the diplomats is to foster the country's foreign policy interests and at the same time to avoid any unnecessary clashes with rivals and allies alike, right? But today we have politicians and diplomats who are extremely incompetent and they have no clue about geopolitics and don't serve the interests of their own people and their nations, but rather they serve ideologies. One of these ideologies is identity politics and the gender ideology, which perceive the political landscape as a big playground for enforcing their utopian ideas, one of which is equity. For example, these ideologies believe that all marginalized groups should be represented in politics, whether they divide them on sex, gender, skin color, ethnicity, race, disability, etc., etc. It's a long list of different identities. Well, it's a great idea, right? But how and where the vertical lines of any society end if every day there is a new gender popping up on the surface and if anyone can identify anything at any time during the day? That's a big question mark, right? My criteria is very simple. I respect every individual's right to identify whatever and however this person wants, but at the same time, this person has to respect my right to believe in the worldview of this person or not, because freedom goes both ways, right? And my second criteria is also very simple. It is competence. I don't care what is your religion, race, sect, ethnicity, gender, etc. If you are a respectful person and you are a competent person, then you gain my respect. And especially when you are a competent person. If you're a competent diplomat, if you're a competent politician, regardless of your identity, even if your identity is different from my identity, then you can represent my interest. This is how I see things in politics. Now, why I'm giving you all this introduction? Because the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian armed forces are very desperate, especially after the very, I would say, humiliating defeat and unsuccessful counteroffensive that they have launched against the Russian armed forces in Ukraine. And I don't know who told them or who is advising Ukraine at this particular phase in this war, because it's very ridiculous whoever is giving some advices to the Ukrainian administration or the Ukrainian government. For example, they sent Greta Thunberg to Kiev to meet with Zelensky, who, according to the American mainstream media, has committed the biggest environmental terrorism act in the 21st century by blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines. This is what the American press says. I do not believe in it. I believe the United States did it. But in any ways, the American press says that it's the Zelensky regime who did this environmental terrorism, and they sent Greta Thunberg to meet with Zelensky. So this has become a really clownish situation where a president of a country who is at war against the superpower, such as Russia, and the nuclear power, such as Russia, is receiving Greta Thunberg to do what exactly? So it's quite clear that they're trying to appeal to a larger audiences and larger, probably and wider audiences around the world through Greta Thunberg's presence in Kiev. But I'm going to come to that later, and I'm going to tell you why this is counterproductive and it's not going to serve the interests of Ukraine. At the same time, we have received the news and we have seen videos now surfacing on social media platforms that the Ukrainian armed forces, they have appointed the American transgender activist Sarah Ashton-Cirillo as the new spokesperson for the armed forces of Ukraine. This is also has the same goal, appointing an American transgender woman as a spokesperson for Ukraine has the goal of reaching out and appealing to a wider audience in the West and trying to say, look, we represent the Western values. If this is the Western values, like do we do Western values only represent transgender rights and this Greta Thunberg? I mean, there are so many other things, right, regarding the human rights, regarding philosophy, regarding arts, regarding music, regarding lots of things, industry, like creating cars, manufacturing, nuclear power. Like there are so many things in the West that the West also stands for and has lots of values, for example, that they can copy and try to attract these people, but they have just picked Greta Thunberg and this transgender activist Sarah Ashton-Cirillo to appeal and reach to a wider audience in the West. And I'm going to tell you later again why this is counterproductive in both cases, Greta Thunberg and the case of Sarah Ashton. So stay tuned till the end of this video. But first things first, who is Sarah Ashton? Who was he or she? I'm not going to misgender her. It has become a criminal felony nowadays if you misgender someone. Anyways, Sarah Ashton Kirillo, she is or he is born in 1977. He was a he back then, also known as Sarah Ashton or Sasa Cirillo, is an American journalist who enlisted as a combat medic in the armed forces of Ukraine during the Russo-Ukrainian War, had previously worked as a war correspondent in the conflict, a self-described, quote, recovering political operative from Las Vegas, Nevada. She was active in Nevada politics from 2020 to 2021, including an abortive run for Las Vegas City Council. Starting in March 2022, Ashton-Cirillo reported on the Russian invasion on Ukraine from Kharkiv, Ukraine, primarily for LGBTQ Nation. I think this is a magazine, right? Yeah, it's an American online magazine, often writing about the war's effect on LGBTQ people. A trans woman, she is thought to have been the first openly transgender war correspondent and the only transgender journalist covering the invasion. In 2015, before her gender transition, Ashton Cirillo went to Syrian refugee camps in Turkey to report on the refugee crisis, had been afraid to enter Syria itself. I mean, if she went to the Turkish side of the border, she could have gone to Idlib, right? Where the people that she supports, these democratic rebels, that would have been so much fun. Anyways, she wrote a book about the experience along the tracks of tears, but was unhappy with its quality, having been preoccupied with concerns about whether the people she traveled with would have accepted her if they knew she was a trans woman. Of course, they wouldn't have accepted her. Not only that, they would have killed her because in the Syrian territories where these so called democratic rebels backed by NATO occupy, they believe in strict Sharia laws, and in the Sharia laws, this is forbidden. Invasion of Ukraine. Ashton Cirillo has said that she began to, quote, hate Russia after visiting museums in the Baltic states while she was writing a novel, Fair, Right, Just, which she self published in 2017. When Russia invaded Ukraine in full in February 2022, she traveled to Ukraine with plans to write a book on both the resulting refugee crisis and her previous experience with the Syrian refugee crisis. I think, yeah, that's all about her life. I wanted to show you who is this person, when did he or she transitioned, and what was he doing in the Syrian case, and now she is involved in the Ukrainian case. And I wanted to check on her work today on Twitter, and apparently she blocked me on Twitter. Although I never interacted with her, I don't know her, I have not seen her work before, but she blocked me. It seems that she saw one of my videos and one of my analysis, and she didn't like it. And it shows how democratic this person is, anyways, because I only block people when they like smear, or they insult, or they say like a very bad words, right? Like trying to uh, drag the discussion into a very let's say unintellectual level. But I never block people who disagree with me. But these people just block you when they disagree with you, and they're the ones who call Democrats and progressives and whatever it is. So I'm gonna show you another video. I think this is also speaks about her or his life. This was him before the transition, and this is her after the transition. I mean, look, I'm not really laughing at her for being a transgender. I'm truly laughing at her because she's a clown. She has no clue what is she talking about. She doesn't know anything about geopolitical conflicts. If she thinks this is about freedom and liberty, then she is a clown. Or she's selling this narrative to the audiences here in the West, thinking that they will believe. But who after 1.5 year of war between this proxy war between NATO and Russia believe that this is about freedom and values and democracy, etc. Everybody knows this is a geopolitical conflict, right? No serious person, no person with two functioning brain cells still believe this is about values or democracy, etc., etc. But let's suppose it is. So they're sending Greta Thunberg, which represents peak neoliberalism and neoliberal values, and they're sending this Sarah Ashton-Cirillo, which represents again the peak wokeism in Ukraine, and she has become the spokesperson for the armed forces of Ukraine. Who are they appealing to? If they're appealing to the Western audiences, let's say in Germany or France, other countries, in the United States, Canada, around half the people, they do not believe in these values in all cases. And the proof of that is the skyrocketing of the political groups in Europe and in North America, in the United States, and they're voting for the conservatives, and they don't want this transgenderism movement to become a mainstream and to become normalized, or to indoctrinate the children at schools. There's so many people nowadays, they don't like what this transgender movement is doing, for example, in their own countries, and especially among the conservatives. And there is a new election coming now to the United States, and we know that the Republicans and the grassroots of the Republicans, most of them, they would vote for Trump. And Trump is against this phenomena, whether it's the Greta Thunberg phenomena or the transgender phenomena, right? So if the planners and the PR team of Zelensky is telling him that by receiving Greta Thunberg and appointing Sarah Ashton-Cirillo, uh, the people who haven't changed their minds about the Ukraine war and they oppose supporting Ukraine in this war, whether through arms or ammunition or diplomacy, etc., in the West, and those are mostly the conservatives, or they have the far right and the far left, let's say, mostly. If they believe, if Zelensky believes that he will be able to gain them on his side, he's mistaken. It's just the opposite, because the conservatives, the Republicans, the AfD here in Germany and in France, for example, the far right in Hungary, and all these countries, the FPÖ, for example, in Austria, all these groups, they and the grassroots of these political parties, they will be sticking more against or on the side of their parties and against the Ukrainian side, because if this is what Ukraine represents, then they don't want it, right? Because Western countries are not only liberals, are not only neoliberals, are not only woke people, they're also conservative people. There are also some people who are in the middle, for example. So appealing only to one segment of the Western society is not fruitful, in my opinion, and counterproductive. Another video I wanted to show you for Sarah Ashton, and this time she spices or she says why she hates Russia. And she, like Sarah Ashton-Cirillo, a biological male, whatever, she's a transgender woman now, who came to Ukraine to play journalist and has now become the official spokesperson for the armed forces of Ukraine, thinks that Russians are soulless subhumans. This person is now leading the Ukrainian info war in English. Look, this is the same literature of Azov, the neo-Nazis. The neo-Nazis say that they are waging a holy war against the Untermenschen. Yeah, Untermenschen means subhumans in German. So this is the Nazi literature that she is using against the Russians. Take a look.
And you understand in that moment what terrorism and what evil is. And then you realize in that same moment was the brightness. So the worst moment of the war for me was also the brightest, because as I stood over her intestines, I understood that we here in Ukraine and across the world who have souls and who are not Russians, who are not animals, who are not subhumans, could still make humanity out of that. That was still the remains of a mother, of a wife, of a Ukrainian, and of a person who loved liberty. And And you understand in that moment.
Anyways, this is, as I mentioned, the Nazi literature, and whether you like it or not, probably transgender people can be Nazis as well if they think the same way that she thinks. And this is her last video when she was appointed as the spokesperson for the armed forces of Ukraine. And this is how she's representing, or she's speaking in the name of the armed forces of Ukraine. Take a look.
This is Sergeant Sarah Ashton-Cirillo of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and you're watching episode 14 of Russia Hates the Truth, a public service announcement focused on countering Russian propaganda, disinformation, and lies, while bringing you the truth about Ukraine's war for liberty direct from Kyiv. Russia hates the truth that over the weekend, multiple successful strikes by Ukraine against the Moscow regime on Russian territory meant that President Zelensky's words about the war returning to Russia weren't just a promise, but a prophecy that has already come to pass. In the same way the soldiers of the Russian armed forces are left to die on Ukrainian land, Putin's cabal of war criminals and terrorists are incapable of protecting the critical infrastructure and defense industry of the failing Russian state. The reality is simple. Russia is defenseless, especially at home.
You know who she reminds me of? There was this minister of information, or the propaganda minister of propaganda during the Saddam Hussein era. His name was Sahaf. Sahaf was in charge of the propaganda for Saddam Hussein during the invasion of Iraq, and he used to come every day to speak with the media and say everything is under control, everything is fine. The enemy is committing suicide on the borders of Baghdad, and they're just killing themselves and blah blah blah. This is just the same, just the same. It's a copy. It's a copy, but the transgender version. And this is why the photo of the thumbnail photo of this video is made of Sahaf and her, Sarah Ashton, which is a Photoshop. And this is her. Angelo tweets this. He says, "Please meet Sarah, the new Armed Forces of Ukraine spokesperson," mentioning Gonzalo Lira. She imagined those sick Azov homophobes realizing about the new society they are fighting for. We, after all, Azov, were low-life hooligans who exchanged their meaningless lives for the trenches warfare of meat supply for anti-Slavic forces. Maybe they should do a poster, quote, "I want you for Ukrainian army," starring Sarah as the model. Even Netflix could not have come up with a series of clownish as the Ukrainian WF project Slava Stupidity. This is yesterday. She speaks about Gonzalo Lira. Gonzalo Lira is a Chilean American activist in Ukraine who was detained multiple times by the SBU. And to be honest with you, I'm reading contradictory comments about him. I will come to that later. But yesterday she posted, or 2 days ago, or yesterday he posted on his Twitter account that he was released on a bail and he has to stand in front of a court supposedly today. And he's trying to escape to Hungary. He made a video saying that he's on the borders of Ukraine and he's trying to escape the country, and posted it on YouTube, and then made a big thread on Twitter again saying to the people that he's trying to escape the country before he escaped the country. But first, let's watch her talking about him, and she's saying like the SBU detained him again.
There's a reason you haven't heard from Gonzalo Lira yet with his so-called attempts at asylum in Hungary. It's because the state security services, better known as the SBU, are some of the most talented and focused law enforcement agents across the globe. And in doing so, they knew where Gonzalo Lira was. There's a reason you haven't heard.
So they knew where Gonzalo Lira was, and she says they arrested him or something. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But let me know your opinion about Gonzalo Lira. I defended him a few months ago when he was arrested the first time, and I made a video about him. And I started hearing contradictory reports about him from Ukraine, by the way, and from Russia, that probably he's an operative for the SBU, and he's infiltrating the ranks of the pro-Russian journalists and activists. And I'm not endorsing this at all. And I wish him all the best for him and all the health. And I hope he is doing okay. But I'm just reading contradictory reports. Some people are saying this is either peak stupidity from his side to mention that he's trying to escape the country while he didn't yet escape the country, or he is an operative for the SBU. And some people told me not to communicate with him. I mean, I'm not even a follower of him or his work on Twitter or elsewhere. But this is what I heard. I don't know. I'm not sure. Let me know your opinions in the comments below, guys. What do you think of him, about Gonzalo Lira? And also, what do you think about the visit of Greta Thunberg to Kiev? And also, what do you think about this transgender activist who is now appointed by the Zelensky government as the spokesperson for the armed forces of Ukraine? Her name is Sarah Ashton-Cirillo. So I've been yours, Almassian of Syriana Analysis. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. And thank you very much for your support. And if you're new, please subscribe, hit the like button. And if you want to support an independent work like this one, please become a patron or become also a premium member on YouTube. There are so many means to support my work, guys. All are in the description below. And see you next time.